Thank you, everyone. We're just giving a minute for all the attendees to enter the room. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Excited for everyone that has signed up to join us today, and this is also being recorded so it can be shared after the fact as well. Throughout the time today that we have together, make sure that we have the Q&A open and you can post your questions in the chat. I'm very excited to be here with an all-star panel today. So today's Lunch and Learn is Transitions, New Boss, New Teammates. And we have three wonderful lady leaders with us today that all have really distinct stories of how they got to the top seat in their organizations. So our delightful King County cohort of panelists includes Catherine Caffrey of Des Moines, the city manager, whose experience included taking career opportunities across the nation, really. Diane Carlson, Bellevue city manager, who was promoted from within to take on increasing leadership roles. And Marty Wine, Tukwila city administrator. So I like talking about Marty's story as to Oregon and back again. Just because she really kind of embodies that Pacific Northwest network and the opportunities that can happen as you transition across state. So again, please, these are wonderfully talented and wise panelists that we get to learn from today. So don't hesitate to use that Q&A to add your questions. The chat's open too, but I'm only so talented as a moderator, so I'll have my eyes on that Q&A. We'll leave some dedicated time at 12:45 to start picking up those questions, but if I see a bunch populating, we'll start those questions earlier, so don't hesitate to jump in. And to get us started, I will just call on each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their career pathway so that we have a sense of where they come from and how they came to this position. So Diane, let's start with you. Will you tell us a little bit about your career path and your overall track to your current role?
Yes, thank you, Melanie. I'm really excited to be here and to share with, as you said, the all-star cast, not only on the panel, but in the room totally. So so Diane Carlson, city manager for Bellevue. In a nutshell, I have one of those careers that's a mile wide and an inch deep because I started as a government relations director. And that was something I worked at multiple agencies, and I'm a Washington native. So I will say that I come with like a Washington background. I've had experience working at the legislature, WashDOT, so state agency, Association of Washington Cities, as a lobbyist for cities, of course. Worked at Bellevue initially for 12 years, and then I left and I went to King County and did a couple of other things at the county and just came back to Bellevue as a deputy city manager and was selected for the city manager position just about a year ago. So I have had a breadth of experience with agencies and organizations and working with elected officials and with public agency and public staff across the cities. And I would say that one of the things that I like to advocate for people in their career is to make good relationships, because I have worked with so many people in different roles for me and different roles for them. And you kind of come back around, and those relationships that you build early really help you continue in your own path, but also help the other person. So that's the nutshell background. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I love that you already gave us a nugget of wisdom to start off the conversation with Diane. You're raising the bar for our panelists already. Let's transition over to Marty. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your career path and history? I'm not hearing you. give just a couple minutes to see if we can get you back on, and then no. Mm-mm. Okay, I'm going to transition over to Catherine and give you a minute to do some troubleshooting. And if you need a second, Marty, just to test tech, then we can do that here shortly too. Okay, Catherine, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? Oh, did we get you back, Marty? No. Okay. Okay, Catherine.
Okay. Thanks so much for inviting me to be on this today as a newcomer to the region. It's really nice to have been included in this. You guys have a really incredible network here, in particular female managers as well. A little bit about me. I joined the city of Des Moines in November of last year, so I think I just hit really the 6-month mark. And I started my career in Little Rock, Arkansas, actually. So I did a small liberal arts college as an undergrad, and then went to graduate school at the University of Kansas. So every once in a while, I see some fellow Coosamats in here, and we have a way of popping up. So, Rock Chalk Jayhawk to anyone here who's a KU person. But so I went to KU for my master's, and then went back to the city of Little Rock, which was a really interesting community. It was very racially diverse, very economically diverse, and got started there for several years working. I'm originally from Texas. I'm a Houston native, so I was eager to get back to Texas for a while. So I spent about 17 years with the city of Cedar Park, Texas, which is a suburb of the Austin area. I started as an assistant too and worked my way up to deputy city manager. And also during that time, I saw the community like double in size, population wise. It was about 90,000 people when I left, and just have a lot of transformation while I was there, which is really nice for your career. But ultimately, I decided it was time to go do something more. Well, actually, originally, I thought I'm burned out on city management and I don't want to do this anymore. And so I left Cedar Park after 17 years and started a consulting business. And within like a few months, very quickly found that I missed being in a city hall. So I'm sure we'll get into like burnout and life balance and all of that at some point today. But, sometimes I took a little detour to go back to where I was supposed to be anyways. So came out here, which was a big change for our family, my husband and son. I don't think we saw even a year ago the idea of moving to Seattle was not even probably kind of in our head. But the Seattle Metro has a lot of similar characteristics to the Austin Metro. And so cooler weather was really appealing as I am going back to Austin this weekend and it's like 102. So super excited about that. But yeah, definitely I've worked in different regions of the country now, different states, and it is definitely interesting the things that are the same everywhere you go and the things that are really, really different. So, but happy to be here and excited for the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And Marty, tech is just so helpful until it's not. I've been in your shoes 100 times and I am so sorry. How is it working for you now?
Am I coming through?
Yes, you are. Happy to have you back. Yeah.
Sorry for that. And so, yeah, thanks for waiting on me while I figure that out. But I'm so happy to be here and also to join, like Diane was saying, our, great panel of Northwest women on this panel today. So thanks for the chance to just say a little bit about where I've been coming from. And I'm excited to hear more about everything we're going to talk about today. So let's see, my nutshell career path. I started like Diane said, I've worked for a lot of different organizations, and I worked for the state legislature and for King County, and then for a little while for cities. I worked as a consultant, a public policy consultant, where I worked for every different kind of government, local governments and courts, and then went to work for a while for the city of Renton. A lot of the early work in local government that I started with was in finance. I did budget and finance work, and went to work for the city of Renton, following some work doing annexations and changes in governance after doing that consulting work, and really had a mentor who inspired me to look at. Work in cities is very inspiring to me. There's so much variety and there's lots of opportunities to do so many different kinds of things. And so had a great mentor in Renton who encouraged me to maybe explore city management. And I was the deputy city administrator in Renton at the time. And as I started to just go on a path to try out whether I would want to be a city manager someday, I went out and sort of practiced applying for jobs, including applying for jobs as city manager. And my travels in practicing interviewing for city manager jobs took me to Oregon, and my first city manager job for the city of Tigard, which is it's a city in the southwest of the Portland metro region, and it's a city of about, at the time, it was about a city of about 50,000 people, and a suburb in the metro area. And really just got a great opportunity to learn and grow as a city manager, build a leadership team. There were great opportunities to do all kinds of interesting strategic planning and financial planning there. Spent 9 years in Tigard as the city manager there, and then went on to a small town, Monmouth, Oregon, where Western Oregon University lives. It's in the Willamette Valley. And 3 years in Monmouth as city manager in Monmouth, where we also, during the pandemic, had lots of chances to grow and learn and make changes. So anyway, I'm also from Washington originally, but had a chance for 12 years to be in Oregon and learn a lot about what it was like to lead and grow as a city manager there. And then because I wanted to be back near family and my spouse's family, we made plans to try to come back to Washington, and applied last year, 16 months ago, to join the city of Tukwila. And I joined the city of Tukwila as the deputy city administrator here in December of 2023. And have been here for 16 months. And a few months into my experience here, we had a transition, and I was asked to serve as city administrator. So here in the last year, I've been serving as city administrator in Tukwila. And so I've said a lot already about what inspires me, but I'm glad to be part of our city. I've been part of great city manager networks, both in Oregon and now back here in Washington, and I'm really glad to be here. So that's a little bit of just about my travels in city government.
Thank you so much. Before this panel came, I was so excited about it, but also I did a little bit of posting on LinkedIn about what other folks may want to hear from this group of leaders. And one thing that came up that I would love to hear a little bit from everyone is, what transferable skills were helpful to you as you grew your career, and how have you translated your skill sets for new roles as they arrived? Catherine, do you want to kick us off for this one?
Sure. I'd say some transferable skills, or really skills that I would really recommend people invest in honing, that have served me well, are not just good communication, because I think we say that and it's just kind of this like throwaway skill, but what I really specifically mean is feeling comfortable doing public speaking, and feeling comfortable doing public speaking off the cuff. That is a skill that, I probably started using in high school, doing, speech and debate and fun things like that. But it has served me very, very well in my career, whether you're asked a question you weren't expecting at a community meeting, or you're at a council meeting, and we all know the conversation trail city councils can go off the rails real fast. So just sort of being ready to kind of answer off the cuff, I think, is really critical, and kind of how you present yourself in that setting as well. And then I've also really honed the ability to give a good presentation, right? That's sort of part and parcel for kind of, speaking well. It's also making sure how you present materials. Are you using visuals the right way? Are you, how do you communicate about numbers and things like that? When I was in graduate school, I took this class about statistics, but the one thing I remember, because I've never used SPSS in the 20 years since then, but was how to write about numbers. And so much of what we do in this field is talking about dollars and cents, or talking about a fiscal impact of something. And so I would really recommend, if you don't feel like you're super skilled at that, it's worth kind of investing the time on and kind of researching, like, how can you make sure you're communicating well about that. So I think that's a really important skill that, when you're starting out in your career, will help differentiate you from probably a lot of other young professionals. And then as you keep moving up through the ranks, really being comfortable in those settings and nailing that kind of presentation and communication and, ability to think on your feet. I can't say enough on how critical I think it is to sort of long-term success.
Thank you. Marty, do you want to jump in with your input on your transferable skills and how they've translated across positions?
Thanks. Sure. I had a challenge answering this question because I was sort of got hung up on, skills, and I think, we talk about when we're growing our skill set about sort of soft skills and hard skills. And I think one of the things that Catherine just touched on was about communication. And I was going to add, as it related to communication skills, I think we always have an opportunity to be building our skill set about how we communicate, both in the realm of public speaking, but also I would say, I mentioned that some of my long ago background was in doing finance and budget work. And I think that communication about funding and about financial challenges that cities face, for example, being good about communicating about numbers, including about money, about how cities get the revenues that they receive, and to be mindful about how we're spending taxpayer resources. I think that I would say that learning about government finances, local government finances, and having a skill set or a baseline of an understanding about how government finance works is really important, and a skill set that I would say has benefited me and that I've carried from place to place, because I think it underpins a lot about how we interact with our community and with our organizations. Related, I would say a transferable skill that I've tried to carry with me are analysis and critical thinking skills, because I would say that both with our community and with our boards and elected officials, we spend a lot of time, I think, reacting to to what's happening, at any one time. And I always hope that we can be data based and use our critical thinking skills to help drive what's happening in a city. And so I would say carrying critical thinking skills from place to place is something that's important, coming into a new organization and trying to figure out using both data and critical thinking skills. Those are important things to, I think, carry to transfer when you're going from transitioning from place to place. And then the third skill I would name that I think is important is listening. I just find that in all of my experiences, that if I can gain a better understanding of what's going on in my community, or if I can have a better and I think there's empathy that goes along with listening, but pausing to listen and understand what's happening in community, it's a skill. So it might seem more like a soft skill, but it's something that I think we can always be developing, and that I've tried to carry into each new role that I've had. So those are a few.
Thank you. Diane, do you want to be our closer on this one?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for explaining what the LinkedIn suggestion means. I saw that. I wasn't quite sure what that was. So, yeah, I will take a little different approach. So, and this probably comes from my intergovernmental background. So one of the skills that I think that's been really helpful to me is looking and seeing the big picture, right? It's really easy, as Marty said, to no matter what job you're in, to be focused in on the things that are right in front of you every day. But allowing yourself and kind of training to step up and see the big picture will be just something that is beneficial to you, no matter what role you move into. Also, this is something that I learned hard early, which was recognizing that the role often that you're in, working in public service is to put the best options in front of the policymakers, but that you then have to let go of the decisions they make, right? And not to take it personally. And that was something I learned in the legislature. That was a hard environment to learn that. But that is a skill that I have kept with me all the way through, because working for a city and working for a council, you do that every week. You have to, and helping employees also understand that, especially if they're new and young in their careers. So that's something that I think is a transferable skill. And then finding your blind spots, right? How to do that yourself. And for me, that was learning how to really use teams well, right? Use other people's expertise, and not to be and to be comfortable. And because I certainly don't have the skills that other people bring to the table, and working together as a team so that you get the best is something, again, that you can start practicing early and continue to build on. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Diana. And you touched on one question that already, and so I'll just start with you in case you'd like to build on a little bit. But the question is, what do you wish that you'd known before taking the top seat? So you talked about something you wish you'd known earlier, but is there something specifically about taking the top seat that you wish you'd known?
I would say that I'm surprised every day, but what I don't know, taking the top seat. So some of the things I wish, Catherine talked about it, right? I'm not a natural, comfortable public speaker, is something that I've had to build my confidence in throughout my entire career. And so that's something that, more and more and more, and I've had a lot of experience doing it. So I would concur with Catherine that the more you can do, the better. Let's see, something else in the top seat. Certainly being humble and asking for help. Again, I have a great leadership team here, and I knew coming in that was an important component of it. And every day, every week, I find new areas that I need to ask for their help. And it's wonderful to have a team that will support you in that. And then this other one, I don't know if you guys experience it, but just knowing you're going to be criticized for not taking the route someone else wanted. You think you know that, and then it hits you, and you're like, yeah. So, just something that it's helping me grow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate too, like, I've never heard a more relatable statement from my time in city management than discovering every day what you don't know. I think so many times people think that someone who's in the top seat is like, becomes omniscient somehow and all knowing, and that just isn't the case. Marty, let's jump to you. Is there something you'd share with us that you'd wish that you'd known before taking a top seat role?
Sure. I thought of a whole bunch of things that I sort of said, oh, I wish somebody had told me about this. And I'm going to riff off of something Diane just said, because I say all the time, I'm surprised every day. And I sometimes wonder, like, how did I get to this point in my life? And I go into work and I'm like, and I'm surprised by some things that happen. And so it's like, I think, well, that, I guess I would say, I guess there's no point at which you think, I've seen it all, because there's new stuff happening all the time. And so the other thing that was a surprise to me was that it's a point I guess I'll make about positional authority, which is that I always thought that even when I was in the top job, that people would come to me and say, either, this thing is going on, or do you know that something is happening. And I guess I'll just kind of generically describe an example. I went through a very difficult personnel situation and had a chance in the organization as it was moving through to be able to talk to people, people in the organization who were experiencing what was going on. And one of them said to me, "I thought that you just knew," right? I mean, it was sort of this. People in my organization think that because of the job that I'm in, that I must just know everything that's going on, and it just doesn't. That's that's not the case. And so I wish somebody had told me that I wouldn't, that one. And the other thing I would say is that with positional authority comes also that sometimes people don't tell you what is going on in the organization. And so having a window into that, I think it would have been nice to know ahead of time that I would need to adjust for that. Another thing, when I first became a city manager, that someone told me and I took to heart, and I still do, is that as a city manager, the council, they are your most important relationships. And so building relationships with your elected board members is very important, and just not not neglecting or ignoring those relationships. I think that's something else that I wish I had known before taking the top seat. So I'll leave it there. Just those are some things that I just continue to, I guess, try to grow and remember those things every day.
Thank you, Marty. And I can already tell we're not going to have enough time today because I wrote down like 3 more questions based on that answer. So if we don't get to them today, give us good reason to cross paths. Catherine, what about you?
Gosh, I mean, Diane and Marty had such good things to say. As the newest city manager to this group, I'd say first, even though I'd been a deputy and assistant city manager for a little over a decade, my boss at the time, she would say, it's different when you're actually the city manager. And I would think, right, but like, not that different, right? Like, I've worked that closely with you. I'm going to know this gig. But it really is different when you are the city manager. And I think to Marty's comment on councils, I worked for an incredible boss. She was the city manager where I was the entire time I was there. I think she's been manager in that community for almost 25 years. And she would say her greatest talent was getting 7 random people to trust her and want to work with her at any given time. And I think she would make that comment as like this throwaway, like, that's not that great of a skill. But really it is, right? So I think what I wish I had, or I am learning now as I am taking on this role, is it's not just creating relationships with the council, but it's also being able to navigate some very tricky waters with them. I don't think they intentionally mean to put you into tricky waters, but you will have relationships with them and conversations with them that they are probably not having with their peers. And so I think there's a real art to how you hold their confidence, yet treat them equitably and are neutral. Like, there's a lot of nuance there that I think is impossible to fully understand until you're in that role. And the second thing that comes to mind on this question is that leadership is very humbling, especially as a new person coming into a new organization. It has been very humbling. How many things I don't know, right? I know Texas law and I know Texas taxes, and I came from a super different political culture, obviously, to where I am now. And so I think just having to ask staff for, like, can you explain this law to me again? I don't understand this process, and sort of see this look in their eyes like, but I got to work for you and you don't know how this process works, can be humbling, but it's also part of what's necessary, I think, when you take it. So I think getting comfortable with the fact that you are not going to know all the answers and you need to ask, and hopefully your staff will have enough respect for you and support for you that they will not mind going through some very complicated process for like the 3rd time or whatever, because that could be challenging and hard on yourself, right? You want to just know, but you don't.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to pause here briefly to thank attendees Julie and Kim for posting questions in the Q&A. We have about 10 minutes till we pivot to that section, unless we start to get an overflow there of good questions. So please feel free to put your questions in as we go. That'll give me a good indicator of when to pivot for timing and to make sure that we're getting as many of those answered as we can. Going back to another suggestion from LinkedIn, I'm curious about how you perceive and or accommodate generational differences, and how has your approach changed as you've advanced in your career and in your different roles? So I think, Catherine, have you had a chance to lead out on a question? Let's just have you jump in if that's okay.
Sure. Well, I remember, probably like everybody on this call, when I was the young professional, and then all of a sudden you look up one day and you are considered the, I guess, middle-aged professional, and you're not. So that it's funny how that sneaks up on you. I have definitely worked with, of course, like everybody here, all sorts of different generations, and I adapt to different styles. But I would encourage us, not to in any way discount the question, because it's a really good one. But I'm always hesitant to stereotype people into these groups, which sometimes we can find ourselves doing with these generational type of elements. So I guess what I would say is, really it's about looking at each employee that you're working with, especially if they're key parts of your team, and really what is their preferred communication style, and what are their strengths and not. I spent this morning working on a PowerPoint for a controversial issue with a staff member who is super amazing, but PowerPoint is like not his jam, and he thinks if you just put an essay on the slide, surely that'll work. So we're adjusting that, because that is not how I think it should be. But the good thing is that doesn't really matter, like, this person's age on that. It's sort of like knowing him and where his strengths are, and where maybe we're a little different. So I think I'm not really answering the question, but I'll say I would avoid stereotyping people, because I've worked with some super tech savvy boomers and who teach me how to do stuff. So
thank you. Appreciate that. Diane, do you want to speak to that question?
Yeah, coming at the very end, as Julie said, the seasoned end of my career. I've worked with a lot of people, and I'm working with a lot of young people now. And I would say that I love it, because they bring such great energy and enthusiasm and interest. I do think our hybrid environment has made it a little bit more challenging to enable us to get to know them and to mentor people young in their careers, younger in their careers. But when I do get to see them and work with them, and I'm trying to get out more to listen to them and to understand what's important to them about their current positions. Why did they come to the city? What do they like about it? What do they find challenging? So I'm definitely doing a lot more listening, active listening of our newer employees, and who tend to be younger, to find out what is it that they want out of this career and their work at the city. They're, as Catherine said, they know a lot more than I do on the tech side. And so I like learning from them some of those new things they're bringing. And I think it's just incredibly important that we take the time as seasoned professionals to bring them in and listen and learn from them.
Thank you. And I know I went to a conference, it's been a couple years now though, where there was panels of young folks speaking from that perspective, right? Of the earlier and mid-career professionals. And they were some of the most popular panels they were. So there is a lot of people with a strong desire to do that listening. Marty.
I don't have anything to add to this question that my wise colleagues have not already said. I thought a lot about this question and want to be careful to not discount the question, but I also feel like when we talk about generational differences, that to take care to not, I feel like there are biases and stereotypes that come along with talking about generational differences, and I think it's much more important to learn about people's learning style, people's experience of what is happening with them in the workplace, and how they want to experience work, and and there's a lot more than the generational differences, if you will, that come into play. So I don't know that I don't have much more to add there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I appreciate that. I know I co-led a session for WCMA recently on generations in the workplace, and that particular, the trickiness, right, of navigating that and thinking about different lived experiences without stereotyping is real, and it was difficult to navigate. So in that case, Marty, I'm going to switch to you for my first individualized question. And I was just curious, what were some of the opportunities and or challenges that you faced in moving your career across state lines? And given some of the open networking that happens between Washington and Oregon, what recommendations would you have for someone who's interested in pursuing a promotional opportunity in Oregon?
I guess I had two observations about this, and one I referenced in my introduction, and that is that there is an amazing, committed group in each state, Washington and Oregon, of city managers, professionals, city and county managers, and folks who are leading in our local governments. Who I would say the most enriching part of being a city manager is being part of those networks. And so when I transitioned from Washington to an Oregon job, I had the benefit of being welcomed and embraced by other people doing this work in Oregon cities. And so both of the networks in Washington and Oregon of people serving in local government leadership positions they're just amazing, and I learn a lot from them all the time. And so I would say that made a lot of the transition piece of it less of a challenge, because I felt like I was part of a group of professionals who were there to, help and share, and that made moving between Washington and Oregon easier. I was part of a cohort of people who were starting anew in Oregon as city managers. I think there were 6 or 7 of us at the time. This would have been in 2011. And we were new managers in Oregon. And some of the folks who had been serving in Oregon did a great thing and put together a one-day workshop. And they titled it something like 6 laws that'll get you fired as a city manager in Oregon. And they invited the 6 or 7 of us who were new to the state to come and sit with them to learn about there are some unique laws in Oregon. And Catherine referred to this earlier in one of her earlier responses, where there's a way that you learn about what the laws are and what shapes the way that you make policy and other decisions in each state, just based on the legal structure that you've got there. And in Oregon, it includes land use, it includes budget, ethics, collective bargaining, purchasing and contracting, tax increment financing. And knowing about those systems and those structures, that training was essential to be able to navigate being a new city manager in Oregon, and also to be, to be able to really function well in that role. And as I have returned back to Washington, I think the challenges are sort of like, shifting my brain between the, Oregon, both the legal construct, but also the policy and cultural constructs that happen in our local governments. And so I guess I would say I felt like, how different could Washington and Oregon be when I was, shifting, when I was changing jobs? And it turns out they're pretty different, but not so different that I think that that group of colleagues who you can, be part of and learn from made it easier. And I think that there are some parallels in the Washington and Oregon legal constructs where cities are concerned that once you learn them it works out. It's easy enough to navigate. So those were some challenges and how I overcame them.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. I love too how you speak to kind of the power of that supported professional network too. So I really appreciate that. Catherine, so speaking of crossing state lines, just cross-country moves can be tricky even for single professionals, but you've made that move and navigated those changes with a family. So I
Mhm.
was curious to hear about how you did that. What were some of the challenges you faced? And then how did you build a network when you were starting out in a new place?
Yeah. Well, I mean, echoing a little bit of what Marty said, for sure, the kind of city manager community here has been surprisingly like welcoming. Not that it was surprising that you all are welcoming, but you know, Texas is a state where there are probably thousands of city managers. And I don't think we would have had people reaching out and wanting to meet with us and stuff like that that I've received here, which has been really, really nice. So, as an outsider, I would say the Washington, and I think it is kind of this Oregon mix too, city manager community is like noteworthy in how sort of inclusive and welcoming it is. Especially when everybody warned me about the Seattle freeze. They were like, I heard so much about the Seattle freeze, and then every time people would like reach out and want to have coffee, I'd be like, "Are you from here or are you from somewhere else?" But just to sort of see if it was like Seattle natives or what. But I have found people to be super welcoming, and that has made things easier. But it's also been really hard, right? So moving across the country with a second grader who didn't want to come, and a husband who was willing and excited, yet also like it meant different changes for him too, has been pretty weighty. But I do think that I am growing, right? And so I think what I would say to whomever's on this call, and I've seen some names, and I know some are early career, some are mid, some are a little more seasoned, as Diane says. But I think it's easy to sometimes get to a place in your career or at an employer where you aren't really growing that much anymore. You know, maybe it's a little comfortable. Things start to feel sort of routine. When I had been in Cedar Park for 17 years, what I see now that I didn't see then was that I had sort of stopped growing. And so nothing puts growth on turbocharge like moving 2,200 miles to a place you've been to a handful of times before. Uh, but I do feel like I'm challenging myself in ways that are going to serve me well, both as a professional and as like a human being. Um, Not all growth feels good all the time. That's part of it. I mean, there's definitely been some very lonely moments when I don't have a huge network yet, either personally or professionally, and I'm in a new place with new laws, new rules, and you know, staff looking at me like, "What do you want us to do?" And I'm like, "Gosh, I don't know. I've only been here a few minutes," so that could be challenging. But it's been good too. And I think the other thing I'd say is that I have a real deep appreciation now for just how significant those moves are for people and their families. I think about how much people say, "How's it going?" And my first thought is actually, well, how's it going for my kid? Because like until it's going great for him, it's not going to be going great for me. And so, uh, you know, I'd had other employees relocate across states at the employer I was at. And I think now I have a real deep appreciation for just how hard that is on a human level too, and how maybe to like support them a little better in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for sharing a little bit of your personal life as a part of this panel. I know that that can be a vulnerable thing. And growth does not, inconveniently come from comfortable places. It does ask us to jump into that discomfort. Diane, speaking of discomfort, in promoting from within, I'm really curious to hear more because a lot of people look at opportunities within their organization. Like, what was your experience in moving from peer to boss? And how did you navigate as what I think Marty referred to as increases in positional authority?
Yeah, thanks. I had some really great support to move into this position, and in that the leadership team, while I'm sure there were some folks who thought maybe a different path would have been a good one, they approached me with a very supportive attitude about it, and I had great support for being a woman in the role. I had such long relationships with many of our staff and our leadership and our council that it's been difficult at times, but not as difficult, or as you said, as terrible of a transition as maybe one would have envisioned. Um, I have used my deputy city managers extensively. So I have a small group. I have three, so I'm lucky to have them. Um, and they are my advisors and confidants, right? So I seek their opinions and their recommendations, and that has helped a lot. And then they have helped to kind of spread out and get our leadership team also supportive. Um, I've learned personally that I need to actively listen and hold back my thoughts. And that has also, I think, helped, right? So I might have been, as a deputy city manager, more inclined to sort of jump into the conversation. And as the leader, I now know I need to sit and wait and listen. And that also has, I think, been sort of a helpful approach. So, and then I think I'm done sharing, but I want to tell Catherine, you have lots of friends on the call. You can always phone us when you're sitting there and not quite sure and lonely. So, and we'll have coffee.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Call anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And Diane, just before we transition to the audience questions, tell me more about that. For those who are like looking ahead to leadership positions on this call, tell us more about the why for the not speaking your
Ah,
thoughts first and the listening
oh,
first, and why
sure.
you chose to do that and what benefits you get from it.
Yeah, so the benefit is that let's say it's often in our leadership group, the leadership team members will feel comfortable sharing their thoughts rather than assuming that whatever I might say is the way it's going to go. So, yep, I listen a lot more and wait and take it all in so that if the decision is coming to me, I've got the benefit of their opinions and advice.
That's
And
great.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so really a good plus up for decision quality, and you having what you need. So pivoting to our audience question, and I'll just take a singular volunteer, so this will be a little more rapid round as we move towards the end. Julie writes, so you're the new boss and you see that you have one director that doesn't align and that you don't trust. How do you handle that? Any volunteers? Catherine, yeah.
I would say, I think if you're the new boss and they've already been there and you're like not jiving with one person, I think the first thing I would do is really make a very concerted effort to try and get to know them, go to lunch, have some real conversations with them. Who are they as a person? What is their background? What do they like about working there? What do they not? Like, I would really make a real effort to try and meet this person and understand more about them. I think the second thing I would do is sort of in an appropriate way, don't skirt around the elephant in the room. So if there's an issue of like, hey, I'm feeling like we're not really connecting, are there thoughts you want to share with me? If you do it in an appropriate setting and you've sort of laid that foundation, I think that can actually be really positive to sort of clear the air if there is something. I had an experience in Texas where I did not know that this person had also applied for that job, or something else had happened. So it's good to give that opportunity. And then I'd say the last thing is, if you kind of go through all that and you're still just not clicking, and it's not just a not clicking. I mean, Julie's question says you don't trust them, and that's a little different to me. I think I'd really encourage you to ask, am I not trusting them because I just interpersonally don't really like them? Or is there an actual issue here? And if there is an actual issue here, this is probably like a very unpopular comment, but it is true. Don't hesitate to make changes. I think sometimes we are very reluctant to make personnel changes because they're uncomfortable, they're hard, it's messy. But if you really have a trust issue with a director and you've put out these efforts to try and kind of figure out how you guys can work together, and it's not working, and it's a real trust thing, I think you do need to make changes. I mean, it's probably for the best for them as well.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's a tricky one to take on. Coming to the next question, Kim asks, how did you get the confidence to apply for the top spot? I am coming from a clerk background. We have a lot of clerk treasurers in Washington, or clerk administrators in Washington state, by the way. Lots of great opportunity and skills that come with that role, Kim. But Kim says, while I am a QuickBooks pro and a payroll specialist, I am not a finance director and feel like that area is my weakest spot. So how did you get the confidence to apply for the top spot? Marty or Diane, do you want to jump in on that one?
I'm happy to. I can say a couple. I can just say two things that I think. One is a little bit of a repeat that I said in my introductory comments, which was I had a colleague, a mentor, who encouraged me to go apply for city manager roles. Some of them that I applied for, I knew I wasn't going to be selected for, but it wasn't just the practice for the interview process, but it was an exploration of me figuring out what were my skill sets, what were the things that I had to offer a city in a city manager role. And so the process of going through the application and the interview and the other processes, I think helped me to build my confidence to at least put myself in a place where I could, say to a city, I want to be a city manager and I want to be your city manager, and here's why. So the process of putting my resume together, talking to recruiters, being part of interview processes, I think helped me to gain confidence, just procedurally. I would say too that to your point about finance skills and some of the skills that you've been able to build, if there's an area that you feel that you particularly have, you've got strengths in some and maybe are weaker in others. I found that volunteering in my organization. So when I worked in Renton, I went to this mentor coach of mine and I said, give me anything, right? Or we were working on at the time, some budget decision making. And, I had some of that finance background and skills. If you go to it within your organization and volunteer for opportunities to be able to skill build, even if it's just as a part of a project, and put yourself in a place where you can learn and grow in the organization that you're in. But those are things that I think can also help build confidence. So those are thoughts about ways to gain experience and confidence.
Thank you, Marty. And I'm totally biased because I started my city government career in an entry-level city clerk's role, and it was the absolute best foundation that I could have had for local government. So you've got fans, Kim. You've got fans. Heidi asks, any tips for navigating, meeting, or introducing yourself to staff when you're new? And Diane, I don't know if you want to jump into this one for us.
Yeah, boy. I have been just this morning doing an employee breakfast, right? We have a employee breakfast series. We do, unfortunately, 3 days in a row, but and I just sit down at the table, right? I go to every table, I sit down and I ask them, how long have you been here? And, what's your role here? And how do you like it? So, and I've been doing that at fire stations as well. So, yeah, my tips are just to ask them questions and they'll get started talking. And then they'll be curious about you as well. So the more you do it, the easier it gets.
That practice, yeah. As an introvert, I feel that, yeah. Tiffany shared that they're coming into an organization experiencing lots of change. What are your tips for helping your teams manage that change? And what do you expect and want to see from your management team as they walk through challenging times? Don't know if we have a volunteer that wants to jump in on that, or
I'll go. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just saying, I have a thought in the last part of the question about sort of management teams. Well, like, what can they do when they're going through hard times? I would say, I think the best thing a management team can do to really help not only the boss, but each other, is to anticipate things and plan for them. So, I mean, like, my favorite people that work for me are ones that are not hesitate to tell me where there are landmines, not hesitate to tell me if they think I'm going off the path. and more so they sort of say, hey, I feel like because this is happening now, this might be what's coming. And so let's talk about that now. I think that's a really great way to sort of be in it all together, and kind of make it through a hard time. But I don't know if Diane had thoughts on the first part of the question.
Yeah, so we have had a lot of change in our leadership team over the last year and a half with retirements and people leaving and new people coming in. So we have managed both that change, right? Just the dynamics of a leadership team changing. We have buddies, so when somebody comes in new, they get a leadership buddy to help them. And then we have also gone through some kind of rough challenges in the last year with a whole new budget process that has, was difficult for people. And so we have been using for a while now a facilitator who has really helped us get through the difficult conversations as a leadership team and, work on making things better in the next cycle. So a lot of we're doing a lot of focus on change management and how to do it well in an organization, and that starts with our leadership team in addition to our managers. So yeah, it's been fun, and the facilitation has been frankly helpful. I know you can't do it for all groups, but it's been working for us.
Thank you all. So I think we're coming to a close. We're actually at the 1 o'clock mark. So if you have to go, then you have to go. I want to give a shout out to Prince, who's been our moderator in the background and is dropping links in the chat to different resources so folks can stay on to take a look at those. Including we have the next cohort 7 applications for the Northwest Women's Leadership Academy are open through just May 26th. So if you want to grow your own network, as we've heard about the strengths today, then would encourage you to check that out. And Diane and Catherine, if you have just a minute for a lightning round to stay on, we had one question from Tawny about the why of becoming a city manager or city administrator, but we'd just love for you to say something about why you would consider folks, why you would encourage folks to consider the top seats.
Lightning round answer, I would say, especially as women, I think it's always easy to find 15,000 reasons why now is not the right time. Your kids are too little, your kids are too old, you don't have kids, you have too many kids, you like where you live, you don't like where you live. Like I hear it a lot from people, all the reasons why it's not a good time. And sometimes those are right, and sometimes you should listen to them. But I think I would say you're never going to really feel 100% ready. I think it's more so when the people that surround you and you trust and truly have your best interest at heart are saying it's time, like take the leap, you should probably listen to them. I think I mentioned real briefly at the intro, I'd been at Cedar Park for 17 years, was really burnt out, thought I was done, and I was like not going to do city management, left, and within like months found myself working back at city halls, and the people around me were like, we knew this is what you were supposed to go do. Why weren't you doing it? So that self-doubt can be loud. So talking to the people that really surround you and love you and know you can sometimes know you a little better than you do yourself and give you that kind of boost of confidence to give it a try.
Yep. And I'll just add to that you're better than you think you are. You know more than you think you do. And it has been energizing, as Catherine said. So the why to do it is because you get to help lead a city into its future in a way that is really special. So that's the why to do it.
Thank you all so much for being here. It has been such a fast hour. I wish we had another hour more to cover mentorship, life balance, burnout, and all the other things. But thank you so much for being a part of this panel. I hope you're seeing all the love coming in the chat for what they've heard today and what you've shared today. But it has been just fantastic to have this hour to talk. So thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Melanie.
Mm-hmm.
And Prince, thank you.
You are welcome.
And it's so rewarding.